I was like 21. I didn't have any role models in the industry on how to behave, on what to look for. LinkedIn was a thing, but it wasn't such a big thing as it is now. I also didn't use Twitter, so pretty much my experience was my own, based on my own feelings. My experience on learning was based on my own mistakes, and I think, if I can get something out of that is I had to make mistakes to learn and be where I am today. I was highly requested. Like, I got a million opportunities all the time up until like a few years ago when the industry started collapsing a bit.
Do you have, and which would they be, your three big heroes of the industry? Hey guys, how are you doing? So today we have Javier Benitez as a guest for our podcast, and we're gonna be going over an interview. How are you doing, Javier?
Hello, Ezequiel. Thank you for having me. I'm doing good. How are you?
Great, doing great. A little bit cold here, but let's talk a little bit about you. You have been working in the industry for how many years?
So I think this year is going to be my 10th or 11th year in the industry. So I started when I was very young, about 18. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to spend all this time in the industry.
Great. And you say you started when you were 18. More or less, which year would that be? And how did you learn game art in order to get inside the industry?
So I think I started around 2012. 2012, I started studying 3D art at a local school. And after like 1 year, I started working in the games industry. And I mean, in terms of learning back then, sorry, I need to kind of warm up.
That's okay.
I think so. What can we go
Back on the question.
like with yeah, back to the question. What was the question on the second part?
How did you manage to start on to study game art? Like what was your first step on to studying game art? What took you there, and how did you, like, what was your process before becoming a professional? Like, going from actually knowing nothing about game art to start as a student and then jumping into the industry.
Okay. So my case was kind of strange, and I must say that I'm in the industry kind of out of pure luck. When I was 17, I kind of went through some hardships in life, and I decided to stop studying traditional studies. I was studying like the normal high school that everyone when they're 17 is studying here in Spain, and I didn't know what to do. I knew I liked editing video and so on, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I found this local school here in my city in Madrid, where they were teaching video editing and VFX and visual effects. And one of the first tools they introduced to us was Maya, the modeling package. So they didn't have spots for video editing, but they did have spots in like visual effects, like more like actual post processing. Sorry, not post processing, but post production. 3D modeling, integration of 3D into movies and so on.
Yeah, more
And that
cinematic.
was my first. Yeah, exactly, cinematics and so on. And that was my first steps in 3D. So it was all out of pure luck, just because they didn't have the course that I wanted to do. I ended up doing something that was just a bit similar, I guess, in name, because it was about moving or animation and so on. And then one of the teachers in that course kind of pushed me into real-time graphics, and then that was when I actually started studying 3D for games, and I guess my first steps were those, just being very lost and lost again and lost again, and then I just found art. And I remember it was like the first or second day that we started using Maya that I was just completely blown out about what you could do with a computer. And I said, I don't want to do video editing anymore. Now I want to make whatever I can do with this 3D modeling thing. And so yeah, this teacher, he pushed me into making real time graphics, and I was really lost, but thanks to him, like, I consider that person like a second father figure, actually. and he really put me in the tracks to becoming a 3D artist. Because back then we didn't have ArtStation, we didn't have too many. At least here in Spain, it was very difficult to find that sort of information. So we had to resort to very international websites, sort of like Polycount. Polycount was what we were using back then, at least what I was using. And I used Polycount a lot, forums, and you know, I would say nowadays the similar process would be to kind of share and receive feedback using Discord. It was a very similar experience. Um, but just Polycount was just a one place for all. Now with Discord, it's all a bit moved into many different channels,
Yeah,
I
I
guess.
remember
But then,
using
yeah, I mean,
Polycount as well
yeah,
when I started, because when I started on 5 years ago, ArtStation has just released, I think, at that moment. So I
yeah.
was also using Polycount, which is like, for those who don't know, Polycount is like a website, but it's more like blogging. I think it was. It's like
Mhm.
blogging everything about game art. So basically, it's a community, and you can go create your own post, and people is going to comment on it. And it was more or less how, like, let's say the game art Discord of before, more or less. You
Mhm.
can build
Exactly.
communities in there.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you, how
And
many years did
yeah,
you said you were on this course before starting?
well, I think it was about 1 year. I could have started in my first 6 months, but then I landed a job that wasn't perfect. Like not perfect. I mean, obviously, first job doesn't need to be perfect, but it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for games, at games development, but this company was doing simulation. They were doing flight simulation. So
Hmm.
I was an environment artist technically, but the type of work was a little bit underwhelming in the sense that I was just doing boxes and unwrapping them using Google Maps images, and I kind of felt like for a first job, it didn't it didn't balance well against continuing to study. So I was gonna learn more studying more than working in this first company. So I decided to go back to school for another 6 months, and I had like another year before I was officially graduating when I they called me from Elite 3D, which is now 2K Valencia,
Hmm.
to be an environment artist with them. I wanted to be a weapons artist, but then they called me for environments. But again, a job is I think a good job is a good job no matter what you need to do, and I ended up learning a lot there. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Elite 3D was an outsourced studio, if I'm not wrong, isn't it?
yes,
It's
that's
it's
correct. Yeah.
it was a big studio at the moment, and nowadays still a big studio for me, I think. But
Mhm.
you went from this outsourcing studio to a way bigger studio, that is Rockstar, I think it was, AAA studio.
Yes.
What took you to make that jump from? I mean, not what took you, but what did you had to do in order to get the attention of such a studio in order to get a job as a junior at that
Mhm.
moment?
Well, so I was very active on ArtStation. As you said, like it was a newer thing. So um, this was about maybe, well, I mean, this ArtStation was just coming out and it was kind of a new thing, and it was very easy to kind of stand up from the rest of artists. Um, and I was just uploading a few vehicles here and there on ArtStation, and for some reason, because I feel like they weren't really that good, but for some reason the ArtStation moderators, they were like always like putting my work on the front page,
Yeah, like
and I
trending.
think which was, yeah, no, at the time, it was a different tab. It was like the picks, so they picked the
Oh
work that
yes.
they liked the most, and they always put me in picks, even though like I can show you maybe later, but the work was really bad. And I don't know, I kind of developed this sort of small following. I think I was like 200, 300 followers at the time, but it was just enough to get to the eyes of a recruiter at Rockstar Games, and they reached out like, we have this job, and I think you could be a great fit, and the usual. And I just made a few interviews, and they asked for a very small art test, actually very respectful test after doing all the interviews and explaining exactly what the job was going to be about, which I really appreciated at the time, because it seems like studios, they will first send the test and then they will explain what they want, but this was exactly the opposite. They explained
Yeah.
everything and then they asked for the test, and the test was just like making the door of a car, which was very simple, a very simple test just to see if I was good doing controlling geometry, hard surface, subdivision modeling, and so on. And they liked it. I ended up making a whole car because I liked modeling a lot, and I ended up making the whole car, and they liked it. And I don't know. At the beginning, I wasn't looking into moving from Elite 3D to Rockstar, but my family moved to the United States while I was here, living in Spain. And so I saw that as an opportunity because, as you know, entering the United States industry is like a very difficult thing. So I left Elite 3D to go with my family, and I think like after a week of leaving Elite 3D, Rockstar got to me,
Hmm.
and I had this sort of decision: is either going to Rockstar Games or going to the USA. And I think I just took the safe bet, which was
Yeah.
getting the job that I had an offer for. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind
I
of a
mean,
long
Rockstar is based in the UK, so you had to move there as well, isn't it?
yes, in Edinburgh, yeah,
In oh,
north of the
okay.
UK.
And how was the process of actually moving forward? Because it happens a lot that many, like, let's say junior artists or students that haven't like had the chance to actually join a big studio where they ask you to move to their country. They don't know really what the steps are in the middle. They are a little bit worried. Like, for example, you come from a country which has maybe less resources. Like, for example, is in my case, yes, maybe finding a place to sleep or to be until you get your first paycheck, it's a little bit hard. It's
Exactly.
something that you worried about, how are you gonna get in, all the papers, those kinds of things. How was
Yeah.
the support of the studio, or if you did get any kind of support from the studio in order
Mhm.
to get to the country where you needed to work now?
Yeah. So Rockstar Games did offer relocation assistance. So I got like £2,000 or something like this to move to the different country, which is, let's say, roughly like 2,300 US dollars.
Hmm.
Um,
At that
and
moment, it was many
they
years
paid.
ago as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it was to cover the expenses of my first month, and it was everything pretty much, like moving my personal things like the computer. I mean, I didn't have much at the time, but my computer, myself, paying maybe the deposit for an apartment, the hotel room that I need to stay on for the first few weeks. It was a very interesting experience because it's a very scary thing. I remember I was very scared, and essentially finding a house is always the most scary thing, apart from obviously leaving your whole life behind.
Hmm.
But as you said, something like coming from a country with less resources, you said something like this.
Hmm.
So in Spain, we don't have such a big industry, so all the opportunities that we get, they're mostly outside of Spain. So I remember when I started studying, one of the things that the teacher told my mother, because at the time I needed to get consent from my mother to study in that place. He told my mother that only one student from him had made it to the games industry, like nobody else of I guess at the time hundreds of students, because it was just as hard as today to get in. And I remember thinking that it was the only way to get something was either moving out or um, falling for lesser conditions, because obviously not lesser conditions in necessarily in the terms of money, but more like in the quality of the projects and the quality of the contracts that we were getting. So obviously we can't compare working on like a small mobile game, indie game, to working on Red Dead Redemption 2, which was obviously what led me to making this decision. Nowadays I think about it, and it did launch my career. And I think that when you're a junior, or senior, even whatever stage you are, I think it's important to not appreciate the titles so much as what the learning experience is going to be like. So I say it's better to work on Red Dead, but that's very relative to what you're looking for. And I think throughout my career, what I've been looking for is learning. So it just looked like I was going to learn more, at Red Dead. But again, it was all
It really
coincidence after
depends. Yeah.
coincidence.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I do I do have that same feeling when I got my first job. I remember it was at Global, and it's an outsourcing studio as well. But they directly did outsourcing for big studios as well. But they also have small projects. But in my case, I think my first job, it was a little bit of a disappointment, and I think many artists have this as well, that their first job is not what they expect
Oh
it
yeah.
to be. Mainly
Yeah.
because in my country, as you said, like here in Argentina, there's not much development of game art or games at all. Like that studio, my first job is the only studio where you can get as much as closer to actually getting in the industry here. Then the rest of the studios, they are just website games or maybe really small cell phone games that never get anywhere, and well, a lot of other problems. But as it's something really new in my country that not even universities is really well developed when trying to teach, the team I had, for example, had no material artist team. So I was a junior and the first material artist of the whole studio of 300 people. I was the first one. So I did.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't about the responsibility, but I was expecting to find someone that knew more than me about this and could teach me on the way. And I think that, as you said, there's people that maybe go and work for a studio because of the title of the game and the project they will be working. While there's other people, like for example, both of us, that were looking more for a place where we can learn more besides being able to do work on the production. Now,
And I think
yeah.
sorry.
No, you go
No,
ahead.
I think out of not knowing the industry so much, we tend to think that the big names are where we're going to learn the most. And it's, I mean, I hate generalizing about how things are going to go because you can find examples of everything everywhere. But I think smaller studios where you're like a more key member of production is where you actually need to do more of the problem solving. So in my experience, again, this is like smaller studios is where I've learned the most. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it
kind
happened
of
the same.
got it wrong from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something really normal because we see a lot of the production. We see the videos that big studios release later after the production of a game, where you see them doing amazing things with a lot of software and technology, trying to make a really great game, and you feel like so inspired. And maybe you are just a student and you're looking at this and you're like, oh yes, I need to go there. That's where I'm gonna blow up.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not always that way, because when you're also looking for a job, they're looking for the quality and your knowledge. And maybe some of these studios can't really teach you much compared to many small studios where you have more responsibilities, as you said. There's going to be more problems you're going to find. And as there is no one else to solve it, then you have to solve it. And that's where you start learning.
Yeah. And one thing I learned about all of this is that it's not so much the responsibility of everyone else around you to teach you, but it's the responsibility of yourself to observe what you have around you to teach yourself. So you can learn a lot everywhere. So a big studio can be a huge learning experience if you surround yourself with the right people. So if you are open to speaking to the technical artists, you're open to speaking with concept artists, you're open to speaking with character artists, they're going to share stuff with you. And I don't know. I have this example of when I worked for Dead Island 2, the technical artist there, principal technical artist, was one of the people in the world that taught me the most, and he wasn't even like directly working with me. And I think keeping an open mind on working with all departments is really what's going to teach you the most, because making games is always about team efforts, not about unique people efforts. So I think to learn more, you need to be very open to speaking with a lot of people and learning about things that might not interest you at first or might interest you at first a lot, but then at the end, they're going to be extremely interesting when you know how to apply them to your own work.
Yeah. I completely agree on that. But moving backwards to what we were talking before on your second job, that was the AAA studio. After working at Rockstar Games, you take another leap into freelancing now. So you went outsourcing, then AAA studio, and then you go freelancing. What happened there? I mean, we did that. Like, there's a huge jumps, which I kind of understand, but trying to get your own personal perspective on this part of the story.
So one great thing about my career is that I started very young. One really bad thing about my career is that I started really young. So there, I was extremely immature, and I have had to get a million hits in order to learn about what I wanted to do. So what happened is a mix of many things. I didn't know how to live outside of my country. I was homesick a lot, and I wanted to go back home. I wanted to be with my girlfriend at the time. I wanted to be with everybody that I liked and loved, and I felt like a stranger, which I was in a different country. I didn't have the tools, the mental tools to be able to integrate successfully. Like nothing terrible happened, but I just felt like I was outside of my place. Um, Also, I was highly requested. Like I got a million opportunities all the time, up until like a few years ago when the industry started collapsing a bit, um, which hopefully it gets back on its feet. But I've always had many, 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 many opportunities, and again, being very young at the time and inexperienced in life in general, what I wanted was to feel important. So I just when the novelty factor of a studio came out, then I got a different offer for more money and more responsibility, and then I just didn't think about it and go. Obviously, looking at that in retrospective, it didn't allow me to grow on a certain skill sets like patience, for example, which is something that obviously with time it had to come. So that's essentially what happened. I got a better offer to be back home. I felt a little bit like a stranger. I was offered more money, um, and I was offered to freelance. And I thought, freelancing was gonna be great because I have 72 hours every day to pick up on three different projects at the time. I don't have to tie up to only one project, and that's not the truth at all. You have this amount of energy during the day, and when you spend it, that's it. You're not going to work on three different projects. But at the time, I felt like freelancer was going to be that. I was like 21. I didn't have any role models in the industry on how to behave, on what to look for. LinkedIn was a thing, but it wasn't such a big thing as it is now. I also didn't use Twitter, so pretty much my experience was my own, based on my own feelings. So I couldn't really learn from anybody else. So again, my experience on learning was based on my own mistakes, and I think if I can get something out of that is I had to make mistakes to learn and be where I am today.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take your choices, and sometimes you make a good choice, and sometimes you make a bad choice, and that's something that maybe many people don't understand. Happened the same to me at that moment. I had an opportunity to jump for an outsourced studio or for a AAA studio at that moment. Again, same like a scenario like you were saying. I had to move out for the AAA studio, and I took the choice not to do it. And in this case, if you ask me, it was kind of a mistake, but that's okay. Like next time I know maybe how to act better, how to make a better decision, and that's something that happens to everyone. It's not that we born knowing everything. It's part of what we call experience. So you
Yeah,
worked
exactly.
on outsourcing AAA, which has
Yeah.
in-house and its own origin IP, and then you went to work freelance. What would you name or say that it's the big difference between working in each of these stages? Like, what's the difference between working in an outsourced studio to working on a AAA studio? And is too much difference when you're working freelance as well?
So I think the most interesting part about the most interesting difference about working for outsource in-house or freelance, I think freelance and outsource, they're very similar. Again, going back to what I said, the biggest difference, an in-house studio most likely is going to be developing similar games. So if you look at Dice, for example, they've been doing Battlefield, and they've done one or two games that are a bit different, like Star Wars Battlefront, but they're still very similar to
Yeah, it's the
Battlefield
same
in a lot of
type of
areas.
game, but with a different context and theme, let's say.
Different skin in a lot of areas. That's true, yeah. So they have what I don't know if there's a specific term for this, but I call this sort of like generational generational experience. So
Hmm.
they make the first generation, the first game, and they gain experience, and they apply that experience to the second game, and then they become very good at making this game, this type of game. So that's the biggest difference with outsourcing, is that with outsourcing, you get this project and then that other project and then that other project. So you might do Doom, and then on the next one you might do Red Dead Redemption, and then you might do, I don't know, Minecraft, which obviously you don't, but it's very different profiles of games and styles of games. So you don't get to develop that sort of generational experience in game development. And working with people that know how to make a game really well can teach you a lot of great things. But also, having to fight many different problems while outsourcing and doing many different projects also keeps you busy in a different way. So in both situations, I think it's very interesting. I think everyone should try the two of them, and you know see their own differences, because outsourcing is great, but at the same time you kind of miss this the stability that allows you to really polish a piece of knowledge. So let's say you only make guns for one game. There's the room for improvement. Um, might feel like it's not a lot, but when you really improve, you really push for improvement. You It's when you have that sort of comfort zone that you can improve on, is when I think you can achieve like the leap on improving that quality. um and it takes many years. It's not one weapon to the next one. It's about it's about not thinking about what you're doing, so that when you stop thinking, you can actually improve the process that you're doing. And with outsourcing, it always feels like you're fighting someone new that's moving in a different way, and they're punching in a different way, sort of thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So
totally.
yeah.
I also find that maybe in outsourcing studios communication it's a little bit harder than maybe if you were
Oh
on
yeah.
in-house studios, because you're
Yeah.
like the third man in the line. Like let's say you have the studio that is asking the outsource, like you have the big studio, sorry, that is asking for the outsourced studio for a job, and you are the guy who has to do it. So it's basically a line of three, and you're the last one on get
Yeah.
everything. And there's always like miscommunications, or maybe the message gets a little bit twisted.
Yeah.
So you need to have
Yeah.
like maybe more back and forwards when producing something
Yeah.
for that as well.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. In terms of soft skills, outsourcing really makes you push for very clear communication, in a way that in-house studios also need this clear communication. But what's at stake at outsourcing, I think it's a little bit more difficult. I think it builds more character in communication in terms of soft skills.
yes, it
Yeah.
does. Like personally speaking, like on my experience, it does give you a little more of like it pushes. You need to be more, let's say, social
Hmm.
when you're working in an outsourced studio, because then you have some problems that you need to talk, and if you don't talk them, there's gonna be a problem. Production is not gonna go well. There's gonna be problems with your job
Hmm.
and maybe with someone else's job. So it's the best things to
Yeah.
actually get into there. And even if it's hard for you, try to talk with the other person. You know that you need to be communicating at in order to solve a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we talk about outsource, we talk about AAA studios, we talk about freelance, and throughout all of these different topics, you mentioned several times about the opportunities you got. Yes, all the offers you were receiving, and that's also, and I want to believe it is also because of an image you had at that moment. That I think you talk about it a little bit on ArtStation, on the ArtStation topic at the beginning. When you jumped into freelance, was there anything else you had to do in order to get new jobs? Like, was it really like it wasn't really hard for you to get a job as a freelancer at that moment, or how did you do in order to get all these propositions? Like, so let's say constantly at this point.
It was a mix of many different factors. Again, one of the things that I said before is try to be interested about everyone else's work, and that builds relationships. And something that was great for me was knowing a lot of people. Um, it's going to sound strange, but up until very recently, I never had to apply for a job. because of I always knew someone that was looking for someone. Like this friend of mine from the industry who's working at this company, and he thinks about you for solving this specific problem because he solved it with you in the past. So that's what that's essentially what drove me to having these many opportunities. I working with another big difference of outsourcing and in-house is with outsourcing you end up working with hundreds of people of people sometimes, and in-house teams can get much smaller. So um that was working on outsourcing for many years really made me build all of those connections, that again brought me all those opportunities. I don't think it was so much about my portfolio. I don't think it was so much about my LinkedIn profile. It was about the connections that I built. Nowadays, the way to build those connections, is probably a bit more through social media. If you don't have a first job or a first place to get those connections, and I think also with all these Discord servers, we get a lot of meetups, where you can go, to somewhere in the world and meet a lot of people. You have also GDC, you have Develop Brighton, all these developer conferences in which actually a lot of outsourcing studios um, go to look for new clients. So it's also a good way to build those connections. But I would say, yeah, it's 100% connections for me.
Great. If you have to give us an example of maybe the hardest experience or problem you had when working as a freelancer, because it's different working as a freelancer as working maybe in a studio, whether it is outsourced or AAA, mainly because when you're working at the studio, well, you're already there and the job is coming to you always from the same person. That when you are freelance, you're always getting from different places the job, and it's like more responsibility because you are your own business at that moment, as a
Yeah,
freelancer.
exactly. So, I mean, I can talk from recent experience more than past experience because I tend to forget the bad experiences quite easily. Sorry. But I think the hardest part for me has always been managing my energy. Um, it's with freelancing, um, specifically, it's difficult to maintain routine. So you don't have to log in for 8 hours. You just have to do the work sometimes. So um, the I'll do it tomorrow is very dangerous. But for me, the more dangerous part was thinking I need to do everything today because I don't know, maybe tomorrow, because I don't have so much control over my situation, over I don't know, because I live in the countryside, so light goes out and I need to do everything today, then I get very tired. So it for me it has been managing time in a good way. And I think I'm there pretty much. For me, the trick for this is routine. So wake up at 9, which is late, but you do your 8 hours. If you need more sleep, you listen to your body, okay? Because this is one of the things that I've made mistakes in the past. I need to wake up early because I need to be very efficient. I need to work a lot. No, if I need to wake up at 9, I'll wake up at 9, and then I'll work until 6, right? But I'll do my 8 hours. I'll do my pauses when I need to, but I'll maintain that routine and I'll be very strong while maintaining that routine. If it's 5:30 and my friends are saying, let's play some League of Legends or whatever, no, we are sticking to the routine. And this way, I think for me, it's the only way I've found to efficiently manage my you know my problem, which is
Yeah.
getting tired and working too much in one go, and then working too little on the next day, and then I feel terrible. So the next day I'm gonna work a lot more, and then I am very tired again, which makes me work less, and then the next day I'll feel even worse. And for me, this is the biggest problem when freelancing, because nobody is looking at you. When you're in the studio, you're kind of surrounded by this vibe of people focused, and then you have these meetings, these conversations, and it's very easy for me to maintain focus. But when I'm at home and I don't know, the dog is barking, then I'll go out, take my headset off, lose focus, go out, etc., etc. So it's routine for me. It's routine, and it's key, um, to be a good freelancer.
Yeah, I really like you brought this story up actually because it gave me two, let's say, two small memories that kind of bring me something back that many people maybe don't have right now. I remember that when I started to learn game art, I was in the pandemics. So there was nothing else to do, basically. I mean, I was locked up in my house with my parents. I was in the same room, just in different position, and everything I had was my computer, and I didn't have anything else to do. At that moment, I was in the university, but I had just started to do self-taught on 3D art, and I decided to go more in that way than following up in university. But what I did have at that moment, just despite nothing else to do but to study or maybe play some games, was a community on the background to which I connected every single day, like if it was a job. Like it was on the Dynasty Empire and also it was in the Experience Point community. Two different communities, but they were always the simple people. It was Ant Marshall from Sierra Division right now. There was a lot of people from different communities, and every single day, in same time, we would wake up, we would connect in there, and we would start working on our projects. So that's something else because this is something that maybe people don't have right now. And it would be unfair not to talk a little bit about this because it is really important. Two different points that you have mentioned. It's important the people you have around when you're trying to do something and being able to say no. If you have people
also
that
to yourself.
yeah, especially to yourself. You are the one who has to say no to yourself, and that's actually what takes you to do better things. As you said, when you're a freelancer, yes. In my case, I'm not a freelancer, but at Fast Track, we are allowed to work. As long as we do 8 hours and we get everything done, we can organize our hours as we want. And as I have the community, I have to do those cuts maybe in the middle, which is actually great for me. But of course, as you said, if maybe it's 6 p.m. here in Argentina, people maybe go already finish working and they want to go for a beer maybe, and it may sound maybe weird for other countries, but they do that here. And my friends are like my best friend. He's like, hey, let's go grab a beer, man. It's 6 p.m. I'm like, hey, man, sorry, I can't. I need to finish this, then I need to do other things. And if I want to get everything ready for tomorrow, I need to be here. So being able to say no, it's really important. As well, it's really important that when you are trying to learn, you don't do it only by yourself. There's so much you can learn by yourself, but there's way more you can learn when you get in contact with other people. Yes, with other people that are also learning, that maybe they made mistakes that you didn't take over, and they can give you that experience. And I don't know, it's like something you transmit to other people. When you are with people that want to go in the same direction, it's like you all push together and you push harder. And that's something really great. That I don't know if
you
it's
said something important there.
In which part of
the part where you say surround yourself with people. When you're freelancing, it's also very, very difficult to be alone. So that's a really important part of a very big hardship of being a freelancer. So
yeah,
I haven't worked on that part so much about surrounding myself with other people, but definitely I detected a problem there.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself that, I work in several studios, but I always work from home. So I never had the chance of actually going into a studio and having, being in just the regular office with someone next to me and the beverage machine and the ping pong around there and the computer for the games, like all these things we always see on the videos. I never have that chance, so I always work from home. And I always tended to work just by myself. Like, I don't have like a voice chat where I connect with my coworkers or anything like that. We do have weekly calls, but it's not that I'm working with someone next to me. It's just me, my room, and my fish. That's all of it. That's all we are.
Yeah.
And I found that getting into, sometimes I get in here in FMA community. One of the guys here, Chris, he tends to join voice chat and stream. So I get with him and start to talk with him, and it makes the work like, I don't know, let's say easier, like less heavy. It's like you have a more enjoyment of the time, and that's actually really, really great. Okay, so now at the present, yes, we talk a lot about your past, yes, where you have gone. Is there before moving to the present? Is there anything I might have missed in another studio you may have visited in the middle of all of your career? Because I think I remember you also work on Dead Islands 2 because you named that, and that's from Dumbbuster Studio, I think it was.
Dumbbuster Studios, yes,
Yeah.
in Nottingham, also in the Midlands in the United Kingdom. A very nice studio. I had a huge learning experience there. Uh
It's a
I
game. It's
left
a
the
great
studio
game.
because yeah. No, it was extremely fun. I mean, I again, it was based on insecurity, not insecurity, but immaturity. Why I left the studio, I thought I could do more, but again, I didn't understand what more means, because I could have learned just the same at the studio, but I've up until 2 3 years ago, I've always had this urge of moving forward, and sometimes moving forward doesn't mean doing something new. It means learning how to do the same every day, and just maybe not the same, exactly the same every day, but it means focusing on one project for a very long amount of time. So at the time, I was convinced that I could do better, and you should move on to this other company that which is doing more relevant art to what you're doing, and it's going to teach you more, and you're going to be a more important artist. And again, it's these. I don't think I regret the decision, but I wish I could go back to that time and think about it again, because I don't know, man. That production was really special, and I'm not saying the game was great. The game was amazing, but it's not the reason why I would go back and make a different choice. It's because of the people that I met in that company, that they were exactly the people you would think you would meet when you start making games. Like, they met all my expectations of what a game developer should be. Like, really cool people, really friendly people, nerdy people in a great way. They loved their work, and it was my place, is what I'm trying to say. And for other reasons, again, just I say this was because of ego, of trying to grow my ego and be like a better and more important artist. I kind of moved out of there because I thought, I already made my. It's like I already achieved this, so
Hmm.
now it's time to achieve the next thing. And that feeling has been chasing me for a very long time, since I started up until, as I said, 2 to 3 years back. But yeah, those were my people, and I was really comfortable there. And I don't know. I think it's very obvious that I really enjoyed my time at Dambuster Studios.
Yeah, to be honest, it really does. Like, by the way you talk about Dumbbuster compared to Rockstar, you can really see that. And in fact, I was going to ask you if the production was as funny as enjoyable as the game, because I remember playing that game, that island too,
Yeah.
and I have a blast. It was so fun. Like, it has a really great feeling, especially when you hit a zombie with the hand. It has like everything is great. The sound effect of the blood coming out, the animation, how like
Yeah.
it has like a feeling to it when you're
Yeah.
playing it. It
It's
is.
it's it's what I'm saying. These guys, they loved the product, and it reflects on the product. It was a difficult production for them because of how much the project moved hands. I think it was originally developed by a different company, then moved on to Dambusters, um, and they had a lot of stuff to rebuild with very little time. And there's obviously signs of this in the end result, but I think they still did a great job because of how passionate they were about this project.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe nowadays in the industry, it's there's a lack of it, mostly in the projects. I feel like there's not many projects like Dead Island 2 where you actually feel the passion
Hmm.
of the people that actually make it. You know, I feel that maybe
Hmm.
in I don't want to start giving studio names, but maybe there's some studios that they feel that they're going over the same things over and over, and they only try to you know enhance quality of the visuals,
Yeah.
maybe getting ray tracing, things like that. That yeah,
Hmm.
they add something to the game, but if the game doesn't feel enjoyable, doesn't feel like really good, then it's not gonna be worth it. And
Yeah.
I really like Dead Island 2. Yeah, I have to be super honest. It felt made like passion, and it happens to me a lot with indie games, where I also feel they are made with more passion. Like nowadays, uh,
Yeah.
many of the games I
Yeah.
played so far are indie as well.
Yeah. we're at a strange point in the industry. I think it's becoming more industrial than ever. And there's this, I think we're in this, I think it's the second time this happens. We're in this second transition where, I mean, it's the first time since I've been a part of the industry. So let's talk about my experience. So, first time since I've been in the industry, we're going through this transition where games are really big in terms of money. And I think studios and investors, they're trying to figure out how to maintain that balance. Obviously, each of the two um, each of the two ends of the rope, they're trying to push to their side of the field. Um, so as I'm saying, we need to find that sort of sweet spot between industry, because obviously we need to eat from this. We need to find the sweet spot between industry and passion projects. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think we will get there. As every evolution, it feels strange at first, and there's a lot of negative things to take from it. But I think that at some point we will build that generational knowledge from the products that we develop as developers, and get to a sweet middle ground. It has to happen, or else
Yeah,
people will stop playing games, or people will not want to develop games anymore. So there has to be this balance, I think, for mental health purposes other than monetary purposes.
yeah. I mean, I I don't really like. I hear a lot of this nowadays about people talking about the industry and how it's the layoffs, people actually not enjoying their games, and I think it's not something specific on the industry. It also happens in the movie industry nowadays. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
absolutely.
shows and
Absolutely.
movies where they just don't like it. Like, and sometimes maybe in the movie industry is a little more visible. Yes, where maybe the
Yeah.
studios are more trying to be like they're focusing in the wrong thing when they're trying to produce or write a story for a movie. In games, I
Mhm.
think it's a little bit different because I do feel people try to make something different. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have
Absolutely.
that feeling, and it happens with me with, for example, Diablo 4. I played the game
Mhm.
and I love Diablo. Yes, I'm a huge fan. I love
Yeah.
that saga. I played all of the games, and Diablo 4 for me was like, yes, it was like all I wanted, and I started playing. And maybe at the end, I got a little bit, disappointed because it was shorter than expected, or that I remember Diablo
Mhm.
3 being. And after that, the next seasons they put out, I didn't like them. It felt like different. But
Mhm.
after some time, this last season, I started playing again because my cousin told me, "Hey, this season is really good for real. Go in."
Mhm.
And I went in, and it felt like the Diablo that I used to play. So I do have my hopes up on it as well, onto that the studios are gonna start, finding again their path, or maybe finding something new. No one knows actually, but there is this feeling that
Mhm.
they are still trying to, to move forward into this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we'll find this sweet spot. I love games. I love making games, and I would really hate it that they become just like another industry where maybe creativity falls apart, and we don't get any more of that. And again, I mean, movies is a much older industry than games, so it's normal that we're seeing those things a bit more ahead of what we're seeing in games, because they've had like good, I would say, good a 70 years maybe to ahead of the games industry, so
a
they
lot.
probably know a lot more, and so on. So yeah, they're able to produce a lot more too, so that's
Yeah,
why we're also seeing all these differences.
perfect. So let's do a little bit of a recap. So we talk about how you started studying. Yes. How did you go to your first job, and the next 3 to 4 jobs you had during your career? Yes, plus you freelance.
Mhm.
Um, what's going on now? How did you? Because now, for those who don't know, Javier right now he's the head of academy of Onyx, of Onyx Academy. Sorry. How did we went from working in a studio, working from production, to now being a mentor? Because this is something I'm
Mhm.
also seeing again a lot around from many artists. Yes, many, let's say, big artists. at this point?
Teaching has always been a passion of mine. I between two jobs, like before I started on the island too, I had the opportunity to teach, um, and it was a different experience for from making games. And I feel like I reached the point after 8 years. Um, I reached the point where making art for games for productions was just a bit of the same. So I kind of needed this break. But at the same time, I got this opportunity to start teaching, and I just remembered the time where I taught it for the first time, and I really enjoyed it. I got to meet a lot of cool people, and actually there's something funny about teaching, and is that I've been learning more about art while teaching than while I was working in production. So it's a mix of many things. I needed a break from intensive production schedules. um, I got a break from that, but it doesn't mean the work is just a little
No.
bit easier. I think it's even much harder than developing games. um, and I just found a new challenge. Honestly, as I was saying, after 8 years, nothing felt like a challenge anymore, because I probably was a little bit burnt out. So nothing felt like a challenge, but also I wasn't looking for that challenge anymore. I'm not the type of person who can take a break, or that can work while not achieving their best at from like every single day. I need to make something meaningful out of my time. I have this problem. Not always I can make that, and then I feel really bad. And then teaching was that opportunity, because I didn't know how to teach. And now it meant learning something new, learning a new set of skills, of soft skills, mentoring, explaining the things that for me are extremely natural, like, moving this vertex 1 millimeter because that's going to fix whatever shading issue in a sub D model. So all those things, I needed to bring logic into the things that are very natural to me, which was a big it was a big learning experience, and it was a big challenge, and I just enjoyed it. And I feel like there's a lot of value in teaching. There's a lot of people now that unfortunately are very lost. They're told this is the way that you need to make to become a games artist, and then they get enrolled in really long courses, and by the end of them they really don't know so much. And I felt like this mission was extremely important for the community that once, when I was like 18, 19, really gave a lot to me. So I felt like for once in my career, I was in that position where I could give back to the community. And then Onyx um, approached me, and we started this project to kind of give this for free to our students. And this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a community. I wanted to make sure that my students didn't have to make huge sacrifices in order to get into games. I wanted to make it accessible, and I wanted a new challenge for myself. And so far, really happy, really big. I think I've mentored around 200 students in the last 2 years. I have like around a 50% success rate in, because again, I can't make it if I don't find it challenging, if I don't find it like meaningful.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, the hardest part about teaching is helping people that don't want to be helped, which is why my success rate is roughly at 50% and not 100%. Because if I could, everyone would make it. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with this so far. I'm learning a lot about art. I'm having a lot of freedom, a lot of questions from people on how do you do this? I don't know. Let's find out. And a lot of, I mean, it's very similar to working as an outsourcing artist, because you get a new problem every day and you just need to learn the way to solve it. And it really opens your way of, because you do things your way, but what if your way doesn't work for your students? Then you need to find another way, right? So this is how I've learned a lot more in 2 years than probably the last five combined.
Yeah, I
So I'm very
think
happy.
teaching is, I think it's one of the, I mean, at this point for me, it feels a little bit natural, but I think it was one of the hardest things to achieve. In my case, for example, I started teaching when I was 13 years old. I was super young, and it was not, of course, about gamers. When I was younger, since I'm 10 years old, I always played basketball. I have stopped, but at that moment, I was really playing. I was in a team here where I live. We were playing for cups and everything. And before getting into the more, like, say, kind of professional side of basketball, I was on a small, let's say, school of basketball. And when I came out of it, they asked me, "Hey, do you want to start teaching?" It's just small kids. It's just like babysitting, yes. And it was babysitting. It was babysitting kids of 5 years old. Some of them have some disabilities. Others were having a hard time trying to coordinate parts of their bodies. And I have to start to learn and see and realize that not everyone had the same ability to learn in the same way. Yes, and that took me like doing it for like I think I teach for over 10 years in there as a basketball teacher. So I got all of that experience, and it really helped me when I started with the FMA community for mentoring and teaching, because there's something about what you said that is also really true, is that you can't help someone you doesn't want to be helped. Maybe you didn't say it that way, but that's something that happens a lot, because there's a lot of people where you will be talking with them and give them advice, and it will happen that they won't follow it, or they would tell yes, 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 but they don't do it. Yes, and that's something they need to change themselves. And one of the biggest misconceptions, and I think that nowadays it's like the most common, and you mentioned as well, is that many people think that by going for an $800 course, they're gonna just get amazing at one thing, and it's not true.
Lucky if you find it for $800.
All I did at that moment, well, I'm doing a course right now, which I kind of left it behind because I had too many things to do. But I was going to give this example where I got into a course, and the course was, I think it was a CGMA. This was an old course, and the instructor was really good. It was about Houdini, and people were a little bit disappointed with the course. And I couldn't really understand why, because the course was what we were promised, the beginnings of Houdini. And the teacher was really good at explaining everything in the video. The only thing is that maybe people didn't put enough time on it. Yes, they didn't open their heads to actually getting to explore.
Oh, yeah.
And that happens a lot. Many people just go and say, no, you have to give me everything done in order for me to do it so I can produce something. And that's not learning, that's copying. In order to learn, you need to find yourself with a problem to solve it. And when your head has work hard in order to solve the problem, that's when you learn. That's when your memory says, this is something I need, because this is something I have to work for. If I come here and give you all the answers, then it's not going to work for you. You're not going to learn out of it. So
it's fighting the program. It's fighting for the solution.
Yeah, and you see a lot of these nowadays. Like, I know, like I've at one point I realized that maybe education nowadays needs a huge change. And talking about these things sometimes it's a little bit hard, but I think nowadays it's a little bit more of a soft thing, because I've been hearing this all around, that there are different, let's say, industries, because not all industries are the same. For example, if you are going to study medicine, then please go to university. Don't do self-taught on that. This is gonna be a little bit hard and dangerous. But for these kinds of things, there's more that you can find maybe at a community and in the internet than at university. And the way people learn nowadays is still, for me, a little bit, I don't know if to say inconsistent, but it's not the best way. And I have some examples that I always share that are, for example, before doing game art, the first thing that took me to this was graphic design at that moment. I was at design school. So from design school, nowadays I have two people that I keep on seeing that are my best friend and another friend. And one of them already has his title, and he's working as a teacher in the same university he was taught. It's nothing bad about that, about having a job as a teacher. The thing is that if you learn at an institute and you didn't have any actual real work or
Mhm.
professional experience, how are you going to translate that to your students? You can't, because you haven't done it.
Yeah.
If you want to
Yeah.
teach something, you
This
need to
this
do
is a
something.
problem we have. This is a problem we have a lot here in Spain too, and a lot of students really complain about this. I mean, it's tough for me to, because again, as I said before, I don't like generalizing, and I feel like there's some situations in which having students can really make you a much better artist. So for example, if you're teaching beginners, like people that don't know how to even start with 3D modeling, then maybe a fresh out of school teacher is fine. But there's a but there. I would couple that that teacher with a more experienced industry professional. So we can think about teachers, I think, in two ways. Um, and we all need this type of mentors, of teachers. We have teachers and we have mentors. I would say we probably can divide them in educators and role models. And I think if you're going to be an educator, just a person that's going to give you a knowledge base, then it's fine if you're able to give that knowledge base. But I think you have to couple that with experience and with real world problem solving and so on. Just one, which is just educators, are not enough for games, unfortunately. Just mentors, just people with experience could be a good thing. So personally, as you know, I'm heading the Onyx Academy, and I have one of my students that helps me with some of these things. She never makes classes like full lectures, but she's helping me here and there, help the students solve basic questions. I think that's very powerful because it can take time out like on more basic tasks out of my shoulders while I maybe prepare a better lesson for tomorrow. But of course, if a university bases their whole teacher base on people in experienced industry on the industry, then obviously that's a bad thing. That's a you don't have a role model for your from your teacher, which I think is something that should be really really important.
Yeah, I
So yeah, we
mean,
have this problem in the industry,
yeah, the thing
in
is
the
that
teaching.
the the way I also saw this at that moment, because I had the chance to see what's going on inside my country and outside my country in other countries.
Mhm.
Also, what I was studying is that it goes more beyond. It goes beyond that. Sorry, I'm trying to get the word on my head. It goes beyond the person who is teaching you. Yes,
Mhm.
it's something a little bit more, like, say, bigger than that, because there's a lot of things in gaming here. It's not only about the teacher not being, a professional on it, but
Mhm.
the fact that the student that is going to the university is maybe not getting the right advice to get a job.
Mhm.
Yes, not and the
Yeah.
quality it needs, because it happens a lot that I am mentoring students now that they are going to a university, and I see what they have done during the university and the portfolio they built, and it's like, but wait, you want to have this role in the industry, and you have a
Mhm.
character in your portfolio, you have a sword, you have a material, then you have a small environment, and it's not cohesive. Like, if how
Yeah.
much are you paying for this? And when they tell me
Yeah.
how much they are paying, it's like, I mean, it's like, I don't know, like by the end of their career they have to be in debt, and that happened to a friend of mine, well, old friend of mine. I haven't seen him in years. While I was studying at that moment, I did self-taught art for 1 year, and then I got a job.
Mhm.
And I remember he was talking about, he was on his fourth year of the career, and I told him, hey, why don't you apply then to any job? And he told me, I am applying, but I'm not getting any answers. Then I saw his portfolio because he sent it to me, and we were talking about this, and a thing that we never touched. Like, I never talked with him about that. Um, and when he told me how much debt he had, he was from the UK. It was like crazy. Like, I can
Oh
tell
yeah.
you, like, with a salary of an industry game job, that debt is not gonna be gone until you're almost like really old, let's say, by not say dead.
Retired, yeah. No, I know. I've had a lot
Jeez.
of people. I've worked with a lot of people from the UK, and they all share this problem. But let me. I think if any students are like find themselves in this situation and they really don't know what to do, I think one of the most important things is, and you need to be very careful if you do this.
Mm,
But the more you know, the more you should be able to find your own um, solutions to problems. So always contrast the information that you get. I tell this to my students as well. I'm very experienced in the industry. I think that in some departments more than others, of course. But I don't think students should be listening exclusively to me on my advice, because my advice worked for me but might not work for them. So
exactly.
um, it's always about checking different sources. I think about this with one example that I have from one of the jobs that I had in the past, where um, I had this art director that used to say, feedback is always a conversation. But if I tell you that you should do this, then just do it. You know, and essentially, just to give you an example, I made this wall red and he wants it pink, and pink doesn't match our color palette. Then I will tell him, pink doesn't match the color palette, and maybe he will say, okay, you're right, let's make it red then. But maybe he's like, yeah, there's another reason that you don't know, that I don't have maybe so much time to explain. So just please make it pink. I
Mm,
think when you're learning, you should be comfortable with having these conversations with your mentors. I learned about this other technique, or this variation to the technique that you're teaching. What do you think about it? And pretty much challenge challenge the knowledge that you get from everywhere. Um, and I think this is the only way nowadays to find the real way of making things. Which again, it's one per studio. I've never had two work experiences where we've done the same thing twice. It's always more poly count, less poly count, more texture size, less texture size. I mean, there's always a variation on the techniques. So, which is another problem that we have. We get mentors or teachers saying, this is the only way to do something. Like, I get a lot of students that it's really difficult for them to stop modeling all quad geometries, because they've been taught that you should always model with quads and never use a triangle. But then again, that's in my experience working in games, it doesn't matter. If you use a
it doesn't
quad, it's
make a
going to
change.
become a triangle. So yeah, it's always very important to look for a second opinion and a third one and a fourth one. And then maybe if the fifth one is telling you the same thing as the previous four, just listen to it. But obviously, if you're not happy with an answer, don't stick to it. That's my solution to this problem, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
when it comes to students.
That's why communities I think are the best, because just by having a Discord
Extremely
chat,
important.
yeah, you can just send an artwork on a feedback channel, and you're gonna have the answer of many people. Depending on how the community is much active, um, and that's amazing because you get a lot of feedback. You get the word from many people, and it's your job to see where in which direction you take. Of course, if you see that everyone is
Yeah,
saying the self, then yeah, maybe you have to change something. But if you get different opinions, then you can choose either one of them or maybe both and try to explore your way and see what gives you a better result. Yes, you don't have to do
exactly.
exactly as you said. That's why always on my mentorships, I think like the first 2 to 3 classes, I showcase how to do kind of the material they want to create, just to give them like kind of a guideline of where to go. But then I tell
Mhm.
them, hey, do it your way. If you find a better
Yeah,
way,
exactly.
that's amazing, and it has happened to
Exactly.
me. And,
Do
and,
it
and
do it your way. I think do it your way until you find yourself in a situation, for example, working for a client that needs it done a different way. But as long as you're able to develop the art, like it needs to meet certain criteria, right? So let's think about making a low poly, right? Um, if my way of making a low poly means that I make a low poly that is functional and it can be used in a game engine and it works in a game engine, then I've achieved my mission, right? Um, but then if a client needs something different, then obviously I will need to learn to work for that client.
Hmm.
But your way is good until there's different needs.
Yeah, yeah, that's the best way of saying it. Like, I think that the way you do things is based on the needs of the studio, and well, not the studio, but the artwork you're going to, your final goal.
Mhm.
But so we talked about that you're now the head of the Onyx Academy. What we really didn't talk about, what is the Onyx Academy? Would you mind to explain what's the goal and what are you guys doing there? What's going
So the
on
Onyx
the
Academy right now,
yeah.
this is like we are aiming to train the next generation of the game art community. Now we are accessible, which means you can study with us from any part of the world and at any budget level. Even if you have zero money in your account, you can study with us. It's at no cost for the student in any way. We're not going to ask for that money in return later. And we aim to professionalize people. What's different about us than any other academy that I know of is that our training is exactly the same as if you were working on production. You get teamed up with other students and you get group projects that need to meet certain criteria. You get a brief and you have to make that brief work. So, for example, now my students, they're making a diorama scene, um, and they're working on in teams of four, and they they need to complete that work as a unit. Essentially, a team is a unit, and it has one responsibility, and every team member needs to be held accountable for that responsibility, and also congratulated for achieving that goal, of
Yeah,
course,
of course.
and rewarded. And they rather than only teaching the hard skills, which is modeling, texturing, all these parts, we focus a lot on the soft skills: communication, team working, receiving and giving feedback to each other, problem solving. So we have a lot of systems in place, for example, to get problems solved. And it starts with research. It never starts with asking a question to other people. It starts with being self-sufficient enough so that when you're left alone in a dangerous situation, you know how to look for the answers. You know how to Google a problem. You know how to look for tutorials. You know how to research, read the logs of whatever software is giving you that error, and you learn how to solve that problem for yourself. If that's impossible or you run out of time, because we usually set about like 20 minutes to do this. Obviously, we don't want someone wasting their whole day just because they're having a problem. So if after 20 minutes they don't find a solution, then they can ask their group. Then if the group doesn't have an answer, they will help them research and they will repeat the process. Then they ask the wider group, which is like the whole class, other groups in the class. And as a last instance, they're going to ask me. So by the time they ask me, most of the times they don't have a problem anymore. But when they do, they have done enough research and found enough not solutions. So I mean, to come to me with a very simple problem that this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. So what could it be? So in this particular example, they learn communication, they learn problem solving, and they learn to build their own brief for a certain issue. They learn to log in a bug, sort of.
Yeah,
Um,
it
so
sounds like the whole process of actually working in a studio. So it's actually quite great to have that. It's been that's like
exactly, and
super
that's what I'm
valuable.
trying to. That is what I'm trying to build. Exactly. And yeah, I mean, it's a very humble project right now. We want to expand it. I teach about 50 students currently. That's what we get, and we have props and environment classes. We haven't launched any character art, or vehicles or weapons specifically. And yeah, I mean, it's just a place where I can give back to the community in the way that the community gave back to me, or gave to me at the beginning of my career. Pretty much,
Yeah,
it's
that I think that's one of the things why I also like decided to start with the Discord community itself. I think while we were talking, I got this kind of thought lost back, but you just get it back to my head. When I think many artists nowadays have a sense of community in game art that it's not normal in other industries. I think it's like there's a whole like huge community that is all game, and it gets all the industry together. And then, of course, you have sub communities like, well, FMA, Dynasty, the one you are building right now, an Onyx Academy. So it's really nice to see that, and knowing that thanks to that, many people can actually get a job and work on what they really like to do. Yes, because for example, if you ask me right now, there's no way I'm changing careers. Not because the amount of time I have put into, because every time I failed or I have a really bad moment in my life where, things weren't looking good on my personal life or on my professional life, I never choose to surrender. I always keep doing something, even if it's really small, because I said I don't want to do something different. I want to be here. So knowing that I was given the chance, mainly by a community that gave me so much, it feels a little bit like I could give back, especially to an area or something in particular that is not being done. In your case, as you were saying, is being able to teach students in a more professional way, into a way that they're going to be able to learn something that they are going to use in the industry. Like they're not just learning information out of the blue that is not connected between them. They are learning connected things that they will be doing on their jobs.
Exactly.
And same happens with a future material artist community, that I realized and I felt like the role of the material artist was kind of like fading away a little bit nowadays, mainly because there's not many job positions available, and that's because there's not much material artists going around, and the ones who actually get a job stayed on the job for almost 4 to 5 years, and that's quite normal. So there was also no community background. There's not much information in the background, so I just went on it as well, as you were saying, just to give back onto what I received, and also because it reminds me of how hard it was for me. I mean, the grind I had to
find
do
all this information
it's all the information, all that, like banging my head against the wall until I find a hole where I can go through. It's something really important. And also all this experience I had on trying to communicate with other artists, make connections. In this case, Enrico Tamehad, a material artist, he was one of the, let's say, main mentors and friends that I have on as a material artist, and he was a big help to building my career. And many people kind of see art, like professional artists, like gods, not specifically like gods, but like people that they don't make mistakes.
I know what you mean.
And because I used to think that way.
Thing for us.
I used to think this the same way, and it's not that way. I mean, we are just normal people. We have our life, we have our goals, we work, and we also make mistakes. It's not like we are mistake free. Like we have taxes for mistakes. We are going to make mistakes. That's how we keep on pushing. The only difference is that maybe we know we are going to make a mistake, and we don't care if we make a mistake. We just keep pushing till we get things right. And that's something like.
And that's a very dangerous thing, because by the time you get to be a professional and you understand that you're at the same level as Enrico, for example, and you make mistakes, then you will feel like, oh, I'm not good enough, because I think he doesn't make mistakes. I always tell this to my students. Comparing yourself to others is very dangerous, because you're comparing your imperfect self that you know to the perfect self that you don't know. So you're only going to show me the best thing about yourself. And that's what I'm comparing myself to. But I know my worst things. So I'm comparing my average of best and worst with just the average of your best. And then I'm never going to reach that godlike level, which is going to be very taxating for my mental health, right? And this is very difficult to manage and to understand, which again was such a big part of my jumping around in all my career. Was, I have to be this good, and the only way I'm going to be this good is if I go through all these steps as fast as possible.
And it burns you out as well. It mentally burns you out. Like I think it took me 2 to 3 years to understand that. I remember working on the studio, like on my first job, and saying, "No, I have to do it. I can't make a mistake. I cannot do or get a task done." You know, and I kind of like mentally punished myself because of that, because it is true what you say. Like we see, like when you see someone you don't know, an artist you don't know, a professional, you see their portfolio and you see all those amazing artworks they have made, and as you say, it's the only thing we know. It's that perfect version of that artist that wants to show because he wants to get a job, and because that's what he uploads. But you don't see all the mistakes he has in the middle. Maybe he has made an amazing gun, but before making an amazing gun, he made a water gun that is like shit. Like it's horrible, and it happened to me. I have materials that I never posted, or I had posted when I was really young, and they sucked. Like my first materials really sucked a lot, and I thought I was ready for a job until I saw something better than mine, and I realized where I was. And there's like, I wish we could actually show that to people, so that
I do that.
Yeah,
I show it to people because I have every old work that I have.
I don't.
saved it on my ArtStation, so I unpublish stuff. I don't delete the projects, and I show this to my students sometimes because they go like, "Oh, my work is not good. I'm not gonna get a job in the industry." And I'm like, "This is what I did when I got a job in the industry," and they're like, "Okay, I feel a little bit better about myself now," because they do that a lot. And again, that's what reverting back to our conversation about mentors and educators. What we need is we need mentors that really show their true selves, and I think that's a big thing. That's a big thing to avoid, being a role model that is godlike, and be more of a human that just has some achievements because they were persistent, which is just a quality that everyone else can have.
Yeah, I think people nowadays worry too much about their image than actually helping the people they're trying to help. You're not going to help anybody by showing yourself as an untouchable force that never makes a mistake, because then when people start to make mistakes, they will fail, and everything they have done with you, it's going to be worthless. It's going to lose a lot of value because they can achieve what they want.
And that's really dangerous for those people too, the ones that they don't want to show their mistakes, because every time you get to work, let me start this from the beginning. I had this conversation the other day with I think he's a common friend of us, and we were talking about unfair competition when interviewing for positions. So I interviewed for just an example. This didn't happen, but I interview for this position. I'm very honest. I'm very transparent. I talk about my strengths and weaknesses, but then someone else comes in and they just talk about their strengths, and they're very strong about talking about their strengths. If I get the job, if I don't get the job, I'm gonna feel like my friend was telling me, but you should sell yourself better. But what happens actually is when you get to the position, you're gonna be asked to be only that strong person because you did that interview, right? You did that perfect interview.
Yeah, that's
no
what
one
you
knows
show.
about your imperfections, and you showed only a perfect version of yourself. The moment you make a mistake, you're gonna be judged, and that's not gonna be good for you. If I make a mistake, but I'm telling you, I'm imperfect, then that's going to be a much easier situation for me. So if I'm honest, if I'm transparent, if I'm humble, a mistake is going to be a lot more easy on me than if I'm this egotistic, extremely you know think very highly about myself person, and then the rest of the people that you have around me, they're going to think that about yourself as well. They're going to judge you under harder conditions.
Yeah, and
So
I do agree a lot with this. In fact, I think that what you just mentioned is also a great way of kind of choosing the studio you want to work, because I think we talk about many things, but there's something that maybe we didn't mention, and despite you did go over the topic, and it's that when you start in the game art industry, there's going to be a lot of studios you're going to visit. Your first studio is not going to be your last studio, and most probably you're going to hate it or not. it's just going to be another studio, but there's going to be one studio for you that is going to be amazing. And I think there's really different ways of actually realizing that. It happened to me when I was doing an interview with Black Shamrock from Virtuos. And I think it was the best interview I had, because I felt like in many other interviews, as you said, I had to fake a little bit about myself. And I was a little bit, kind of hiding my weakness. But in that interview, I just was myself, and I even took the art test and I failed it, and it was all right, And I talked with he was Connor, the name of the recruiter. He's an amazing person, and he's one of the best recruiters I met so far. And I remember instead of just ignoring because I made an art test and I failed, he just keep supporting me and told me, hey, if you want to keep on practicing this and want to come back in the future to retry it, you can do it. And I think those things they're small signals of this is a great place to work. Yes,
this is the right place. This is the conclusion we reached with my friend.
Yeah, because
like, but then do you want to work in that place that accepts you for, they fall for this sort of trickery, or do you want to be in a place that appreciates you for what you are?
Yeah, basically. I mean, when you are with your friends, are you yourself or are you someone who you are not? So if you're not going, if you're let's say if you're in private time, if you're more intimate time, you want to be yourself. Why wouldn't you want to do it the same at your work? Why wouldn't you want to be at a studio that likes you and values you for who you are? Sometimes maybe the project is what you want, but even if the project is what you want, if you don't enjoy working on it, it's gonna be a hell for you. And I think that's also a really tough lesson to have, because there's the only way of knowing.
Tiring.
Yeah, it's gonna be hell. So there's a small set of questions I have to you. It's a random set of questions that you already read them, but before moving to that, there's one main question I wanted to ask you, and is that if you could have like the power to change anything in the industry right now, what would that be?
See, I told you before we started that I was going to prepare the questions, that I wanted to improvise on these.
That's okay.
But this one's actually difficult to improvise on.
You want I can
change about the industry?
I mean, I can change the question into something more, let's say, easy.
No. I think no.
I mean, rephrase it. Maybe like, what's your like?
No. Wait.
Okay, I'll wait. Let's see.
I think. Why don't you tell me what you would change about the industry? Maybe that would spark some ideas on me. Because being very honest with you, I think these types of questions they are great, but I'm this type of person who, in the last years, learned to accept imperfection for a different reason. So for me, like, this is going to sound like philosophical and whatnot, but if something is imperfect and it leads you to make a mistake, there's something you can learn from that. And it's, again, very philosophical and in a way, easy speech, populistic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Populist. It feels a bit like that. But I think it's the truth. What would I change about the industry? Well,
if you want to know, like, for example,
I'm gonna rephrase that myself. I instead of changing something, there's something that I would love to see in the next jobs that I find is working with more people. And again, I'm not saying that this is something that I'm not experiencing, but something that I would repeat is working with people that are passionate about the product that they make, and they make a product that they want to make because the idea is original and not so much because it's a sequel that works. I would say that's probably one thing that, as a gamer, more than as a developer, I would love to see more original ideas coming to life rather than a sequel to a sequel. With one exception, I would love a sequel to Resident Evil Until I Die, because that's just my favorite game, and they do sequels right. I think we can distinguish sequels in two ways. Like the sequel to something that is just like a reskin, like a better RTX enabled version, or a sequel that actually generates a new story from the universe that you're So I want to see more original ideas. Um, they don't need to precisely be new sequels. They need to be original ideas that bring something new to the table, even if, it's risky. And I think that's something that the industry is kind of losing now. It feels like we're not taking that many risks when it comes to making games and getting new ideas. And I think that's something that I would love to see moving forward, as I saw in the past in a lot of the games that I've participated.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I just needed to spark
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. See,
Sorry, I know I kind of
I
went
love
through.
how
You
you
tell
did
me,
that
and
though,
now.
because I love how you
Okay.
started with talking about being able to face problems, to make mistakes, and to take that into
Hmm.
making something better, and then you end up talking about the industry doing exactly that at this same point, and
Yeah.
needing to do those things, take mistakes, takes risks
Hmm.
in order to get better. But going
Exactly.
to the bonus questions, let's call it. So, what would
Okay.
be the best three pieces of advice you could give to a student that is trying to get in the industry?
Hmm.
It doesn't
So
need to be someone that is
I'm
actually
I'm
studying,
gonna
but
do.
it could have be someone that already finished their studies and they are struggling to get in the industry as their
Yeah.
first job.
So I think that the most important thing is for artists is that you're an artist, and that means bringing creativity to the table. So do what you like, and there will be a market for you, rather than looking for the market and adhering to the market. I think there's a sweet spot between the two, but it should always be more about how much of an artist you are. Um, because everyone can learn to make another gun, another level with mega scans, and another piece that has already been done. I think the challenge today is using the extreme amount of tools that we have to build something new, to make something that defines you as an individual and as an artist. So again, be what you want to be, and a market will be there for you at some point. If you're good enough, you will get the job. I think this is one thing one of my favorite rappers says is like, if you make the best donuts, everyone will buy them. And I think that's what you need to make. You need to aim to make the best donuts, and um, donuts being whatever you want to make. If you make it good enough, the job will come to you. Then a second thing would be more on the hard skills department. Um, do breakdowns of your work. I think it's very important that we try to always showcase the way we've like the problems we faced, and how we solved them, and what was the challenge we were looking for, what type of market we were tailoring the work for. Because I think that's also important. As long as you need to keep it individual, like you need to keep it your style, but it also needs to be usable by the industry, of course.
Yeah.
So show your problem solving, show your breakdown, show your decision making process. I think that's extremely important, and it's a piece of advice about only one student so far out of the 200 has really chased, and they landed a job. I think it was a week ago on their first game studio after not so long of studying, actually. So it's a very efficient way to get yourself known. Because again, you make one post for art on ArtStation, and that will be one post. You use that post um, to showcase how you did, say, how you solve this problem with these nodes in Designer. Then you can make a post about that. That's now two posts from one piece of art. And then you make a post on how you come up with your ideas. Then that's three posts on a piece of art. So you're kind of you don't have to feed the posts too much. Like, you don't need to spam on one piece, but you need to be intelligent about how you use the work that you've put in. So if I spend a month doing an environment, I'm gonna make sure that month is not only one, like, condensed or boiled down to just one ArtStation post. It's gonna be one ArtStation post, then it's gonna be one breakdown blog. Then maybe I will pick and choose this asset, and then I will make a Twitter and a LinkedIn post from a small breakdown from it, and I will make sure that I stay relevant I mean, it's not my favorite choice of words, but that I'm in the front page. I'm aiming to be in the front page more than just one time with this piece that I generated. So breakdowns, again, that could be written in videos, um, anyway that you feel like. And then a third advice. Um,
That second advice was really, it's really good. That's exactly what I did when I was trying to get a job. And
mhm.
during the years, I even started to do it better. And again, that's something else I would also try to include in students learning, that is about the brand they have as an artist and how they manage it.
Yeah,
Yes, on the overall gamer community. And just to be clear, because it happened to me last time, when you talk about a brand on an artist, it's not about their logo, it's not about, the graphic designs they have, it's everything that person is and how other people perceive it. And the best example nowadays is, in this case, for material artists, is Javier Perez. Javier Perez is a person who
yeah.
started as a great artist. He was just posting materials, but in a moment he started helping, he started teaching,
Then
and
one
now,
day tutorials, and then he's like
and
all the
that's
time
how he
throwing
built a
content
brand.
at you,
and
and yeah,
and there's different ways of doing it. You
exactly.
have Daniel Heiger as well. Daniel Heiger, this brand
Yeah,
is the god of material art and substance designer, and you
yeah,
can see it because you
yeah,
look at his portfolio, and you you know it's something more complex to have a conversation another day. But
yeah. So yeah, I think tied to all of these, a third the third advice would be use your work to network. So if you do breakdowns, then you're going to attract views. You're going to get a comment like, "Oh, I loved how you did this," or "How did you do this other part?" So that is the golden question. When you get that, "How did you do this?" This is how I've made friends in the industry. How did you do this? And then I will make a post specifically tailored to that question, and I will tag that person or send it privately. Obviously, you don't spam their name, you don't use their name without their permission publicly. So, hey, reach out to them privately. I made this. Can I post it? Should I tag you? All of that. I think it's really important because some people prefer not to be tagged by strangers. Um,
yeah,
but use the opportunity of your work to meet other people, ask questions. And I think third advice in one word is network. Do networking. You need to meet other artists. I know precisely zero artists who have made it to the industry without knowing quite a lot of people.
yeah,
So it's very important that your name is on the front page, but it's also ringing the right ears. So, for example, Ezekiel here, we didn't speak before, right?
no,
Um,
we never met
Ezekiel,
before, actually.
sorry, I
Yeah, it's
tend to
okay.
I tend to pronounce the words in English, but Ezekiel, so we didn't meet in the past. I
No.
think I commented on one of your posts, and then it
Yeah,
all
same for
triggered this
me.
whole conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
the conversation to take you here. Yes, I think it was
mhm,
that. It was a comment. Yes, it was a comment on one of
yeah,
my posts. Yeah, it's true.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I knew it was you because I've seen a lot of your posts in the past, a lot of your breakdown posts, right? And I mean, obviously, there's the coincidence that one of my friends knows you from the past, I think, and he said, "Oh, that, yeah, I know him. He's cool, whatever." And obviously, I accepted. But what is important about all of this is that you were not a stranger for me anymore because I had seen your breakdowns in the past. If you had only posted work on ArtStation and then you reached out to me based on one comment, I mean, probably we would have done this because I'm always interested in talking to people. But to someone else, it might have been a different story. But with you, because you post a lot and you're very active and you do a lot of breakdowns, you had already been on my front page for LinkedIn for like maybe 10 to 20 times. So I knew who I was talking to and so on. So I think that is a very important thing is to network, but do so because you have work that backs up your connection in a way.
yeah. In fact, yesterday I released a post that talks specifically about this, like exactly what you're talking about. And since I started with the community, and trying to teach people and so on, I've been reading a lot on maybe other parts of how to provide value to people and how to actually help people. And there's this
Mhm.
guy who's called Alex Hormozy. And you have seen I upload all of his codes mostly because he's like a kind of a hero for me in some aspects. Because I matched with him in many other things besides being a gym rat and any other stuff. But I remember I wrote yesterday's line, which was that people will tend to help you more when they know more your story. So the more people know about you, the more they will be willing to help you. And this not only applies
Exactly.
to, cases like, in fact, this one that we get into a podcast, but it's going to also help, students to get into a job. And the best example I had was with Black Shamrock. The interview I had with them was it was the easiest interview to have. And it all happened because of one post. I posted an artwork. Connor liked the artwork and commented on the artwork, and then started to follow me on LinkedIn. And I say, okay, let's just go for it, and just send him a message, being respectful, being myself. And he told me, hey, we have an open position, apply. I'm gonna put in a good word for you, and gonna try to see if they like you. And they did. So that's how things started, and that's something that many people really don't see. I think it's great that you focus on making great artwork, but there's gonna be a moment that you're gonna have to transition and be someone of presence in order to get that attention. Because figure this out. If you're like, how many people would want to work on a Star Wars project? Like nowadays, everyone wants to. So if you want to work for, I don't know, Star Wars Outlaws, or you wanted to work in Ubisoft Massive Frontiers of Pandora game, there's going to be thousands of applications, thousands. So if you can do something else besides your portfolio and artwork to outstand more, then you're going to have greater chances. Like at this point, I think that if there's a massive studio and Javier Perez comes in and say, hey, I want to work here, they're going to stop looking for people. They're going directly to him, and they're going to tell him, hey, what do you need? What do you want? And that's the power of having a brand as well in this case.
But I think it's also important to make this distinction, not distinction, but clarify on something. As a student, I was scared as hell to do this because I felt like my work wasn't good enough. But I missed a lot of opportunities to showcase my learning progress or process, right? So I think even if your work isn't, Javier Perez type of work,
of course,
which obviously it's a very high level to achieve. Even if it's not there, don't feel like you don't have an excuse to not to post something. Because I think even from the very first, again, this student of mine who got a job very recently on actually one studio in Madrid, who's like, everyone wants to work there, that live in Madrid, and this guy, I think he got the work because he was breaking down his work and he was making it look like a vlog, and he found a very creative way to just explain his process, and he was doing it from a very humble perspective, from the perspective of someone who hasn't had a job in the industry yet, and it worked out perfectly fine for him. And that's what I'm trying to say. You don't need to be a super rockstar professional to do a breakdown and to share your knowledge, because as this principal technical artist said when I worked at Dumbbuster, an idea is never stupid if it sparks a different idea. So if your breakdown is let's say lower quality in your eyes, it might still be very relevant for me because you speak about this one thing that might be extremely useful. So I don't think it's good to feel like you don't have enough, because this is what a lot of students tell me, but why am I going to do a breakdown if I'm just learning? It's because that learning could be relevant for everybody at every level of skills.
Yeah, I think that when you are learning is the best moment to actually share, because it's the moment when you make more mistakes and you have more things to share.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you don't have anything to share, then just start doing things, and things will come. I today I post a short or a reel on how to make a tile generator. A brick generator for your pattern. And it's super simple. Like, it's really simple, but people maybe don't know how to do it. before getting more, let's say, professional with FMA, the first things I started to do was I just explained what the notes in Substance Designer do. You can actually go and look for that on Google, and you can find it yourself. But I did it for you, so people were also sharing that thing. So you have things to post. You just need to find what you want to post about and what you're working on about. So that's something
and what
really
makes your
important.
content special
Yeah.
as well, because I think what makes your content special is that it's not my content. So it's a different mind. It's a different way of looking at the world. And I think that already makes it special. Because again, if it sparks an idea on my brain, it's already going to be very good.
Yeah, in fact, if you want to learn more specific about, creating content and uploading, I have a guy for you that is, he's called Chris Doe. He's an Emmy winner and graphic designer from the USA. He's an amazing artist, and he talks a lot about this. And I have a phrase right here and I forgot it. Oh, damn, it's a so good phrase from him. But, well, he says that whenever you're trying to post content, try to tell in a way your story. But when you tell your story, that's the most valuable thing you have, because that's something that no one else can replicate. And that's really true.
Exactly.
You can't, that's
very nice.
What you live is what you live, and I can't replicate that. Maybe we have some things in the middle that may be like similar, but they're not going to be identical. And that brings a whole new perspective to everything you do. So again, I think that if you can't do that, like best advice, do it from the beginning, or try to record or save information about your past, so you can then use it later to do some things. Because if I have saved all my first artworks and not delete them out of proud, maybe today I would be able to show people more, my progress on how I started and how I ended. But I don't have that, unfortunately. And yeah, so it's actually really good to do that and to have that and to be considerate about that part that is not as visible in the industry right now. So I'm reading the bonus questions, and I didn't realize the depth of what we were going to talk, and I made the dumbest question. I don't think the dumbest, but the less serious.
Again, no dumb. Maybe they lead to really nice topics.
Really? Okay. Are you a cat or a dog person?
Cat or dog? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm both. Actually.
Okay, me too.
I have 2 dogs and 1 cat. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I wanted to just add a question just to break up a little bit the flow of what we were doing. So going back to something again more professional in industry, you work a lot with props, yes, environments. What is maybe the best or your more favorite step in the production pipeline?
Ooh, well, so. Nowadays, like with all the stuff that's going on with artificial intelligence, a lot of people tell me, I wish we had an AI for UVs. I wish we had an AI for low polys.
I do the same. I say the same.
No, sorry, but not for me. Every step of the process for me is perfect, because it's kind of like a roller coaster, right? You don't get the rush of the big fall like I get from texturing without going through the very hard step of making perfect UVs. It's kind of like there's this balance that we have right now on games production, game art production. That's very nice start with the high poly, then maybe a little bit more chill. I can listen to a whole album while I'm doing the low poly and UVs, and then a very nice rush when I'm doing the texturing. And I don't know, my favorite part is probably texturing, just for short. But every part of the process for me has a deep meaning. I think I couldn't just be a texture artist. Personally, I mean, I appreciate the importance of not the importance of focusing on only one thing. I have a lot of friends in the industry who are past texture artists for traditional, like more older projects. They texture with Photoshop, and it was more of a specialized skill in some local companies that I know from here.
I was lucky enough not to get into that part. to texture with Photoshop. I would have hated texturing at that point. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but these guys, they made it such a they made it such a seamless effort, like effortless process, that now when they have Substance Painter, they're just killing it, right? They're doing great work. So but for me, like I appreciate how they got really good just from doing that one thing, and now they're modelers and texturing artists, and they do great work. So it's important to focus on one aspect, I think, and polish all of them. But for me, I think it's the whole process of high low bake UVs and texturing. I think I couldn't choose one. If I was pointed with the gun at the head and said, you only have to do one for the rest of your life, I probably would have a very hard time choosing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I would choose UVs and low polys over texturing, but I definitely I think one is not enjoyable without the other for me.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's true. I think, like, personally, in creating materials, the what I find is that the workflow is way too different to anything else you have to do.
Absolutely,
you have all the
you
workflow.
are modeling in a way.
Yeah, you are modeling, and the
with
modeling
your
is
height map.
Yeah, basically it's the thing is that in other softwares, maybe you go to ZBrush, then from ZBrush to Blender or 3ds Max, then you go to Maya to do the UVs, then you go to Painter to make the texture. In Substance Designer, you do everything in the same place, so it's a little bit hard to break up that workflow. And I would say, like, best part is also the high creation, the modeling of the texture.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about rendering the material I've done that is really fun and frustrating at the same time, because you rather do something amazing, or Marmoset or Unreal starts crashing every 5 minutes. So you have kind of mixed emotions there, and you don't know what to pick, to be honest. So moving to the next questions. And this one is a question, again, personal question, because I think many people, it's better for them to actually start to see that we are more like humans than anything else. Do you have, and which would they be, your 3 big heroes of the industry as game artists?
This question, and I was having dinner with my friends, and I was talking about particularly this question. When I started modeling, I think heroes were extremely important. Now I think I need to think about this one. And I've been thinking about it because at first I had many heroes and people I really admired, and I still do. I think they're very relevant artists, and they're very. So it's not that they did something wrong that I don't see them as heroes anymore. I think it's more on myself now. I learned that I've had my heroes, and then I've become a hero for some people, and then I understood that my heroes are just people, and that it's very dangerous to give this status to other artists. That's kind of a party breaker type of question. I know it's very negative, but
I think
I don't know, man.
It comes to the part where when you start learning, basically, you see all these professionals in a specific way where you can see them like heroes. But when you have become a professional yourself, and you maybe have achieved so much goals from what you wanted for your life in this specific industry, it kind of like starts losing that magic, because you start to see that you are at the same, let's not say same level, but you are doing what they always did, and it's like you kind of lose that part of hero. Or sometimes you even met them in person, like it happens with me with Javier and Enrico, where I met them and they're still great artists. The only thing is I don't idolize them so much as I did before.
Yeah. So a lot of my heroes became my friends. So I kind of don't believe in like
that's
type of relationships in friendship. But it's also, I think, to the wrong mind, it could look like a very negative answer, the one that I gave, but I think it's actually positive. If you think now, it's a complex thought. And it's kind of slipping through my head. It was clearer than water what I was going to say, and now I feel like I've lost it. Just give me a second.
Sure. In the
And
meantime,
now it's the pressure to say something, right?
no, don't worry. I
So
have
heroes.
some. If you want to ask a question, you can write it on the chat for the moment while we wait. So maybe it's also, I think, how to say it. It's a little bit
Man, it
more.
was really interesting what I was going to say, but I just feel like
Yes, you
I
have the
lost the
idea there,
words
and
there, and they were so. Yeah, yeah. It just flew past my. I hate when this happens. This happens sometimes in class, and I feel like, dang, like I was gonna solve a world crisis or something, and all of a sudden I'm just this guy who's quiet on the screen, right? But no, man. I mean, heroes. For me, again, it was something related to ego. And
oh,
right here it is. So
there you go.
I have this relationship. I have this weird relationship with ego. I've been a person who aspired to be a lot, and my life and my decisions were driven by how good of an artist I was. If I'm a good artist, I'm a very happy person. If I feel like a bad artist, I'm a very unhappy person. And this was all my ego.
Completely.
So I've had this sort of realization in which if I have these heroes, I'm sort of real. This is sort of related to the ego. So if I have these heroes, then I'm thinking about these people as better. So something that I need to aspire to be. But then again, for my ego, for my experience and the way I've developed as a person, that's very dangerous because I'm chasing perfection. So rather than looking at these people as heroes, I look at them as people. I like their work, I admire them, and I respect them a lot for their professionality. But I would never kind of put them in a place where I need to be better myself in order to be more like them. Because that's also, I think, very dangerous in the way, again, and this is me today. I think me in the past, like 10 years ago, it was very important to me for me to have these heroes, these people that I really admired and I really wanted to be like them. Because more than heroes, they were the direction I wanted to go. So my past self, incredibly important to have heroes. My present self is trying to build my own person that is only influenced by my own decisions and my own actions and my own wishes and my own goals. So if I have role models at this point where that are people that I need to aspire to be, that's going to drive me in a direction that if I don't follow, as it has happened in the past, I'm going to be disappointed with myself. So I have friends that I admire a lot. I have industry professionals and colleagues that I admire a lot, but I need to learn to be my own hero, if that makes
Well,
sense.
I was about to say exactly that same thing at the end. Um, this graphic designer I was talking before, Chris, though, he also had something to talk about that, and he was talking about, mentors and heroes. That he rather have a hero than a mentor, because when you are a mentor, you are almost kind of like transitioning yourself into someone else. You're trying to be someone else, and
So
usually that's not.
he wanted to be a hero or he wanted to be a mentor.
No. In this case, he was just talking about the difference between a hero and a mentor. Yes, in this
Okay,
podcast
okay.
he's doing, and he said that he rather have his students believe in heroes than in mentors, because mentors you start to kind of mimic them, and that's not always good. For anything, like if you think about it, if you want to innovate or do something, then you need to do something different to what comes behind
Exactly.
you. So having a hero, it's the best way, because it's something you aim to, as you said, but you need to find your own way. But I think, as you said before, and that's like something I'm living right now at this exact moment, is that I don't think about having heroes. I think about becoming a hero for myself, like becoming myself, the
Exactly.
person I want to be tomorrow. And that's also something that takes me to do all the things I do. Yes. So it takes me to, I don't know, let's get some examples. It takes me to have never surrendered on doing material art. Yes. Even though things were bad, never surrendered. I've been, training for 3 years, and most people when they go, to train or to try to enhance their health, they don't take that much time on it, because it takes a lot of time and effort. And I've been doing it for 3 years, and I can really see like the changes, not only like visually, but in other aspects of my life, emotionally as well. Yes, and all these things happen because you have a, let's say, a mental image of who you want to become, just of what kind of hero you want to
your
become.
hero.
Yeah,
That mental image of who you want to become needs to be your hero. But I think someone else with different experiences, different. So, for example, let's say I admire someone from the USA a lot, right?
mm,
As we said before, working in the USA is extremely difficult for me because I don't have a visa and no one will sponsor a visa for me. I mean, unless a very rare occasion.
I have the
So
same.
I want to work on the same studio as this person, then I'm not gonna get there. So instead, I mean, I can have this hero as well, and I can adjust my expectations of I want to be in the same position that this person is, or a similar position than this person is, but I want to do it in my own way, right? So I think
Yeah,
that would be the healthiest way to relate to this in terms of heroes. But again, at the beginning, it was so important for me to have heroes. Man, I remember like checking Alan Van Rysing's
yeah.
posts back when he was doing Autodesk Gameware robots for Autodesk Gameware, like very like this was probably 2013 or something, and it was just such good work, the vehicles he made, and I was looking up to that and I was like, yeah, I have a benchmark. And again, I think that word is very important, having a benchmark. A hero is for me in the art community was more of a benchmark, or it needed to be more of a benchmark of what art I want to make and what's the quality that I can get to. So that was extremely important for me because obviously only from one person, which was my teacher at the time, you couldn't get all that information. So yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a complex topic, man. I
Yeah,
feel.
it is complex.
Yeah.
These questions were supposed to be easy, so they are not easy at all. I
Yeah,
can
three
see. I need
answers.
to.
So this person, and this person. That's it. That's my heroes, right? Oh man, I wish I was that
So
simple sometimes.
no, yeah, I think it's better if they are complex. The simplest question can be complex as well, because the idea is to kind of talk of many things that people really don't hear a lot, or maybe have, again, as I said before,
Mhm,
a really wrong misconception of it.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I have a question that it would be kind of like, it would be needing of a summary of all we have talked so far. That would be, what would be like, in this case, the key or the most important trait you had in order to become a professional. Yes, because
So I
we
was
talk
always
about,
as.
because we talk about doing branding, networking, everything, but
Mhm.
at the end there's always something specifically we need to do, or that we have as artists, that make ourselves great enough, or let's say good enough to get in the industry. What was that for you?
So I'm not sure if this is what got me in the industry, but I'm sure it really helped on my first interviews. But I've always been this thin air, transparent person, like as transparent as thin air. Um, really transparent. If I felt something I needed to be asked, I asked it. If I got a question, good or bad for myself, I answered it transparently. I remember when I was much younger, I used to skateboard, and I had this hero back then who also used to skateboard, um, who I just, sometimes I found him on the local skate park, and I would, kind of listen to the conversations he was having because I really admired the guy. And I heard him say one day, because he opened the shop and he kind of dropped the professional career more to focus on the skate shop and so on. And he said, you know what? Honestly, the what I'm looking for in life is just going to bed and falling asleep and not getting woke up by any of my thoughts of not being comfortable with any decisions or actions that I've made, or something like that.
Hmm.
And I remember I took that like, well, whatever. But then when I started working, because I mean I was like 15 at the time, stupidest person in the planet probably. And I remember when I started working, I started studying, sorry, and was aiming for my first work. I learned how important it was to be transparent and how important it was to be honest. Because again, when you sell yourself above what you are, you're gonna get judged for that. Now, this didn't happen to me specifically, but I've seen this quite a bit, and it's always been a fear of mine. So this led me to being very transparent. And this transparency, I'm not sure if it makes me unique, because probably a lot of my peers have that quality as well. But I think if I had to change something, that's not one thing I would change,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
it gives me so much more.
yeah, it's your personal trait onto that really helped you a lot in this case. You know, to to keep on going on this. And this takes me to another question with another topic on top. At is that getting into the industry just the first step of the journey. Being able to hold to the industry, it's another different thing, and
The
that's
easiest
something.
step.
Yeah, being able to hold to it, I think it's a little bit harder, maybe in some cases, because of all the
Getting
things
in the
that happen to
industry.
you.
Sorry.
No, just go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry. No, please. I don't want to interrupt. I think we have a bit of lag, and
Okay,
I
yeah,
thought you were done.
it might happen that you have new Wi-Fi connection, so it's a little bit. But as I was saying, first step would be to get in the industry, and it is really hard. But I believe, or maybe it was my personal experience, and it could be different to anyone else. Of course, it's not something. It's not something like the same for everyone, but being able to hold into the industry and being able to take over the different things that happen to you and that you have to experience and you have to live on is even harder than getting in, I think. I don't.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
not harder, maybe different and more. Let's say more challenging for your head. Yes, because maybe when you are learning, you are able to do whatever you want. Yes, you are able to explore. It's this magical world where you're exploring and trying to get a job. And when you get that job, you are super excited and everything. But then when you start working, you realize you are not doing what you want anymore. You have to start to do what everyone else tells you to do.
Sometimes.
So
Sometimes, yeah. So yeah, the hardest part is not getting in. I agree. And I have one example. I have a friend. Well, I haven't talked with him for a long time, but I had this friend when I worked in the UK. Um, that he only worked on one production, and it was his first production and his last production, and then he moved on to a different sector, completely different sector, away from computers, away from everything. So production is very hard, and it takes the best and the worst out of you. um, and I think this is something we fail sometimes to explain to people, is that games is another job, and we're not like kids wanting to be astronauts and we're just going to fly to space, and no, it requires a lot of training. It requires a very cold head, and
a lot of
it requires
multitasking as well.
understanding that, yeah, and it's a job and you need to do it, and you can enjoy it a lot, but you need to set your mind right and understand that while you're at the job, while you still need to be creative and you still need to perform correctly and make the best art you can, um, you still have to adhere to other people's expectations. You still need to adhere to timelines. You still need to make a lot of sacrifices. You're essentially sacrificing your baby all the time, because the art is your baby. And it sounds really weird, but art is
No,
your
it's like
baby, and
having a
you're
child.
essentially
You
making
know?
sacrifices to it. Yeah, and you're changing it, and you're not educating it to the way you want to do it, and art becomes everyone's, right? Once you're in production, you need to learn to do that. Also, it's all fun and games because we're making games, but it really isn't. Again, you need to be serious, you need to be focused, you need to perform. And at first it's fine, but I think with years, like, because the adrenaline boost you get from your first job, it's like it gets you very far. But then when that settles down, and you actually start with experiencing the routine of one day is equal, like is the same as the next day and the same as the next day, which again you can get very focused and in your zone and find the beautiful little things about the work we do, which there are many of them. But until you learn to do that, it's going to feel like you can't break that routine, and it's going to be very difficult to maintain mental health and not burn out. At least that was my experience
No,
also.
yes, I do agree.
And it was is hardest part is to stay healthy in the industry for me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that takes me to the other question I was going to do. That was like, talking about this, that, you know, being inside the industry is not everything perfect. What would have been the worst experience you had as an artist working in the industry? Because again, we are always sold, when you go to any kind of promotional video, you know, of any studio that they want to hire you, come to our family, we have this and this, you can get a beer from the fridge, you can do, you know, all the things, these ways of selling to you, going to work there and for their projects. But it's, the industry is not all, you know, happy endings, let's say.
Should we? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. We can.
No, I'm looking at all the questions that we're getting.
Yes, I was going to go specifically for that. But let's see. We have Damian. Sometimes in a job application or during the interview process, you may get this question: what sets you apart from other applicants? Have you ever faced these questions? And if so, how did you answer them?
Okay, so before I go ahead, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you, Ezequiel, because
it's okay.
I have a terrible lag, and sometimes I feel like I say something and then you start talking again. I feel like
don't worry.
I'm interrupting you, and I don't want to be rude about that. So I apologize in advance if that's happening. I just don't want you to feel like
don't worry.
I have this urge to speak all the time.
No,
so
it's
I think
okay.
it's a good question. I think it's a good question. What sets you apart from other applicants? I mean, if I got asked this, I would probably freeze, because again, I have this sort of fight with ego and feeling better than someone else. If I get this question, honestly, I will probably think this is not the right place for me to work, because they're making this comparison between artists, and I think that's a very toxic thing to do. What sets me apart, if I really would need to answer that question, what sets me apart from other applicants is that I can really level myself with the team and work in the team as another member who's willing to drive the team to success. Just give in my case, when I face these sort of questions, I give the most generic rule book answers just to get out of there, because I honestly, I hate that question. Sort of like the salary question. You know, it should be phrased differently. What sets me apart from other applicants is something that you should see from my application letter, from my curriculum, from my portfolio. And it's not really up to me to put down other artists to put myself up, and increase my chances of getting this job. I think it's our responsibility as artists to really respect each other, and I feel this question kind of holds some weird tone.
It's
but again, if I really had to answer, it would be a generic rulebook type of answer.
Yeah, I mean, for this one, like, I think I have really good soft skills on some of these questions usually. So when I get this question of what sets you apart from other applicants, I feel like maybe the person that's asking this question is looking for a very specific set of a person. And it could be also a tricky question, because you have a way of answering like you are unique, and maybe that's not what they're looking. Maybe they are just making these questions to see if you believe yourselves to be unique, and that would be something bad for the team, so they are trying to, you know, filter out of you. But other cases, they can be looking for someone like Javier was just mentioning, someone who doesn't believe he's on top of anyone or he's better than anyone. And these questions are kind of tricky. So I think that in my case, I try to get kind of into, let's say, into character at that moment, or just be yourself, you know? It's one way or another.
Yeah.
If you be yourself, just answer like what you feel like. Like if you say what sets you apart from other applicants, and you really don't feel that there's something that makes you different from other applicants, you can go on and say, I don't know, you can go on and talk about maybe some of your strengths that are maybe a little bit unique of yourself as a story, as a person. Maybe saying, well, I'm an artist who really wants to learn a lot, and in this studio there's a lot of things to learn, and I know there's a great work environment, and I'm really willing to give it for it. And
But in any case, I feel like I've never gotten this question. I feel
no, me
like
too.
this question is also like a style of interviewing that isn't so much, at least from the interviews that I've had, isn't so much a games interview. Because
Yeah, I agree.
the interviews that I really enjoyed and that I went really well, they're more like conversations. They don't feel like you're being investigated for your crimes. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They feel like
yeah,
you're
indeed.
getting to know each other. The company, the team, most likely the team is getting to know you. Is kind of checking your vibes and seeing if they're happy to integrate you into their team, or if you're just like a super different person that might not be that missing piece to the puzzle. So I feel like these interviews where you get these questions where you need to give right answers, they are a symptom to maybe those teams. I mean, when I'm going to be very transparent with you, when I've interviewed people, I've only wanted to make them comfortable so that they reveal their true selves. And if you get people to be while interviewing, if you put people on the spot constantly, then it's risky because you're going to get dishonest answers. You're going to get defensive answers. You're going to get, you're not going to get that true person. Then that true person is going to reveal themselves with time on that team, and that might end terribly. So I've never gotten this question, and I mean, if I were to get it, I would probably say, I'm a great team player, and go with
Yeah, I
something like that.
mean, I think that's, yeah, these kind of questions, and this what happens, that when I get a question I really don't like or don't feel that it goes with what I usually have as an interview, as you said before, because most of my interviews were like actually conversations. It was like talking not with a friend, but getting to know the other person. Um, Having a question like this is a little bit weird, but
Mhm.
at the same time, I think it's kind of generic. So giving them a generic answer isn't that bad as well, because I know you maybe are trying to get a job, but you also need to think about yourself on, do you really want to work in a place where they don't really consider you as you would consider
Exactly.
yourself? So
Exactly.
try to get those things in your head as well when you're in the interview. Try to actually I don't say make friends with the interviewer, but get to know them well. Try to see if there's something in common, and see where things go. Be kind of like a little bit more loose with yourself, and not that, let's say, stiff about the question and having a good or a bad answer. There's no good or bad answer. Yes, it's just,
Yeah.
are they the right fit for you, and are you the right fit for them? That's all it's about.
Exactly. And it's also about having conversations instead of interviews. That's also your responsibility as an interviewee, or however you say that. If they ask you, I don't know, what sets you apart, and you answer what sets you apart, and then you're quiet until they ask the same question, and then what's this, and then you answer, and then you're quiet. You're kind of forcing this sort of rule book interview. So I would try to, like we're doing, Ezequiel and myself today. We're kind of picking off of each other's topics, and that's what I would try to do in an interview. So that's what a conversation is. So you can have a questionnaire that is spoken, or you can have a conversation, and I think you should aim to make interviews conversation, and it takes practice. And again, I would practice with friends. Just try to trick them into building a conversation out of an interview. Give them a set of questions, and make it so that when you're practicing with your friends, you manage that they stop reading the script and they're interested about something that you said, so that you can kind of learn to drive conversations in the direction that is interesting for you.
Yeah.
It's difficult, it takes a lot of time, but it's going to help you avoid difficult situations in which you're quiet and you're waiting for a question. And if that question is messed up and you don't like it, then you're kind of failing that interview most likely. And I mean, I know this question. It's not. I know that you're asking because you've been asked for this. Sadly, this is what happens. Um, if it's a written question, I would use the opportunity of not having to reply in real time to really craft your answer, and maybe look for different opinions. Again, I mean, my opinion is very idealistic. I'm a very idealistic person, and I think I have enough opportunities, and I don't mean to I guess put myself in a high position for this, but I get enough opportunities to be able to say, this might not be the workplace for me if I get a very uncomfortable interview like this.
Yeah. There's
I
a
mean,
big
and this should be the position for everyone, by the way.
yeah, that's
If you
true.
get one job, there's no reason why you're not getting two.
Yeah, that's true as well. If you're getting one, you can get many more. But
Exactly.
I do think that nowadays there's a huge misconceptions on interviews, because when you are a student, you don't have the experience of an interview, so you don't know how they work actually. And again, there's not many people
Exactly.
talking about that, so I'm also glad we talk about this. But as you say, it's a conversation when you lead the other person to one way and they lead you as well. So don't worry about the
Exactly.
questions they're going to make. Worry about maybe actually meeting the other person, knowing if this is the right spot for you or not. And when you do that, you're gonna see that in the middle, the recruiter is gonna make the questions she needs to know. Yes, and most of the time, those questions are the ones that you don't expect. Yes, like for example, what are you doing in your free time? What's a hobby you have? Those are the things that they maybe want to know a little bit more about you, because they want to break into you. They want to know you as a person before letting you into their team. They're not going to let anyone come in, and if you are not able to socialize to a level with just one person, or being able to communicate and show that there's gonna be a good kind of flow of communication, then that might be a problem. So you need to
Exactly.
practice that as well. But don't worry if you go to an interview and you don't get it, because it's hard. It took me, I mean, 5 years of work and interviews, because even when I'm at work and I'm still doing interviews, because I want to be up to date with new opportunities always, because you never know what will happen to your job. That's one of the disadvantages of working for someone, is that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and tomorrow you might lose your job. So if you have maybe an application, not an application, but a message from someone telling you, hey, we have a job position for you, are you interested? I don't think it's a bad idea to answer, hey, I'm interested in this, but I'm not available at the moment. If you want, we can talk about this next week, and we can see if it's good for me, and if the future, if I'm available, we can get to talk about this later. And so far, it has worked really great for me, and it has gave me a lot of opportunities and life saving. So next question is from Sam. She says, while branding ourselves, is it necessary to always post new work every time? It might not always be possible, and it can be taxing on mental health.
I'm not sure what you mean by new work, but if you mean always posting a piece that you have created from scratch to finish, from your own idea. So, um, new work doesn't need to be extremely creative work. Like, I've done something that no one else has made. If you can do that, that's great. But sometimes portfolio also means to cover a certain skill set. So if you say you want to make materials, I think there's a few materials that every material artist should know how to make. So if you want to go ahead and prove that you can make them in your portfolio, um, you don't need to be make. I mean, I think we can call that original art. Like, it has some originality to it in
Yeah,
the sense
and
that
passion
it's
projects.
it's new to the world. Yeah. So I think all work needs to be yours. That's of course, but it doesn't always need to have your own super creativity in which you're surprising the world with a new idea.
I think
So no, I don't think it needs to be like that.
No, I think that Sam got confused on the part when we were talking about branding and posting our work on LinkedIn and any other places that you said to post as constant as we can. So maybe what the idea wasn't, maybe we didn't leave it clear, is that when you do an artwork, Sam, yes, when you go into the creation of the material, and you can take it in my portfolio because I do it in my portfolio, you, besides doing the renders, you also do a breakdown. Yes, the reason of creating content is of providing value to your audience. So you can provide value from different ways. You can provide it just by doing a render where you do something amazing, something weird, and they would like it and they will follow it and they will support you because they like what you did. Or you can share with them how you did it. So there's different ways of actually doing. So let's say you did one material, then from this material, what you can do is not only show the renders, you can show how you did the height map. Yes, and you can break up that height map into different parts, let's say 5 stages, and you can post that different days. Yes, you can break the render processes, the base color process, anything. It's pretty much what I do, or you see me doing every single day with the content in here at FMA. Sometimes I work on one project and we just break it up, and you're gonna be able to see more of that soon because with Kai we are working more on that as well. So we have another question from Toxic. Nice to meet you. I was really intrigued by your personal story, and something I'm trying to master right now is prop and hard surface art. I finally detached myself from model only with quads notions, but I get really discouraged when approaching firearm shapes and super intricate parts. What is your approach with models like that? As I'm not super confident in understanding the topology needed to prevent shading artifacts, do you break down your references with colors or draw them to understand the flow of your topology?
So I don't do either of those things, but I do a variation of one of them in my head. Um, I break down the shapes of my models from large to small, and I work with booleans most of the time.
Mm.
Then I mean, there's a process in which you send them to ZBrush, and then you do like a polish crisp edges, you dynamesh, and then polish crisp edges, and what you get is sort of like a smooth smooth edges, right? That you can bake onto the low poly. Um, Now this is for games. Obviously, a high poly has one purpose, which is to be baked onto the low poly, whatever maps you need, and it has no more purpose than that. It doesn't need to have a clean topology. The clean topology needs to come in the low poly. And again, clean topology is a very wide term, and it depends on who is asking. Generally, I mean, there's obviously rules for this, but anyways. So what I tend to do is I break the big shapes. So let's say we have, I don't know, let's say we have a normal gun. I would model the big shapes first, the ones that compose the silhouette of the object from let's say further away, um, and I would do that so that I don't have any shading issues. And again, big shapes, it's sort of like, I mean, I don't think I can show you examples now or share my screen or anything, but it's kind of when you draw, you first make like a circle, and then you know you working with basic shapes. So you start working with those basic shapes, and you polish on those basic shapes to the point where adding more detail, you can do that with a boolean. So say on a 1911 model, you have this sort of long um, long slide, and that's long slide is like a cube that has a rounded top, right? So you make the cube with the rounded top, and then as a different part, as a different piece, you would make the cuts for that part. You would do that as a boolean. So again, the way I think about this is, and the sort of the philosophy is, break down every single shape into a different problem. You first solve your biggest problem, then you solve the smaller problems, and then the smallest problems. So big shapes, you solve them first, and you go one by one. You don't think about your life as one event. You think about your life as many days, and each day you solve one little thing, and that's what you need to do about your modeling. You need to think about it as one step at a time, one vertex at a time. So you need to, it's difficult to explain without actually getting my hands dirty right now and opening the 3D software, but I can recommend a nice tutorial on ArtStation Learning from Alex Medina, who made this blender tutorial for it's like a small revolver, and he kind of
Oh yes.
explains this process very nice with Blender. So I think you can pretty much get the idea from everything in there. So, but I think the
Great.
most important part is breaking down the shapes. So if I were to model this finger, I would first do this large portion, then this large portion, then this last portion, and then I would do the nail as a different asset. So it's one thing to polish at a time. It's not just one big thing that I do all at once. As long
Yeah.
as you maintain proportion, that generally works really well.
Perfect.
It's a bit open, but hope it helps somehow.
Okay, great. So we also have Mike. He's letting us know he's a lot of us are our own hardest critics. This is not a question, but I do think he's right on it. we are the hardest critics we
Yes,
have.
we are.
But well,
Absolutely.
we've already been on this for 3 hours, and it has been really enjoyable to to have you here, Javier. Thanks a lot. It was really it was a really first podcast, to be honest. I felt
Awesome,
quite
man.
comfortable, and I hope you did as well.
Me too, man. I loved it, and thank you so much for bringing me in. I'm absolutely, I don't know, grateful for that opportunity. And if you feel like we can do this again, I'm surely
Sure,
in.
yeah, we are. I can tell you from now on. I can tell you that we are going to do this because it's something about talking with someone and being able to do all of these things together, and also helping other artists to have a word in a place where maybe they don't have much of a word. It's also really great.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Great. So
Thank you.
hope guys you all enjoyed the first podcast, and well, you're gonna be seeing, I don't think you're gonna see the full podcast on YouTube because it's 3 hours and that's a hell of a long video. So I'm gonna most probably just make one chapter, yes, that is gonna be the full podcast with the most important parts of the interview that we have planned before doing the podcast, and then most probably we're gonna cut all of this into different parts where we are going to make, like, let's say, different videos with more specific, so it doesn't kind of look so heavy on you to look later, and you can look into more specific topics whenever you want. So once again, guys, thank you for coming, and thanks to you, Javier, for coming as well.
Thank you, Ezequiel, for having me, man.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks
no problem,
everyone
man.
for coming and listening.
Okay, guys, I'll see you all later. See you.